Welcome to the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, a Week in IndyCar listener Q&A show. Recording this on a Tuesday. Apologies, y'all, for missing last week's episode, but we do indeed have some great questions to carry over. Also, a little bit of news brewing from late last week, early this. So get into that at the upfront here, and then get rolling into your questions in just a moment. Thanks once again to y'all and all the great questions you fire in. Into our pal Jerry Sudduth, who puts everything together for me. Really do appreciate you, Jerry, for grabbing all the questions, placing them in a entertaining order, and presenting them for us to do here on the show. Let's very quickly pay some respects to those who make the show possible as well, and we'll be right back. Time to say a big thank you to our show partners on the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, starting with Pfaff Technologies, build-to-print composites manufacturing company. They're specializing in medium to large-scale automotive, motorsports, and military applications. Visit PfaffTechnologies.com. It's P-F-A-F-F Technologies.com to learn more about their services and how they can benefit your business. Next, it's the Justice Brothers, makers of premium additives, lubricants, and cleaners, been servicing the automotive and motorsports industries for more than 85 years. With victories in all the biggest North American motor races, including the Indianapolis 500, the 24 Hours of Daytona, the Justice Brothers products are truly race-proven. Learn about their vast history and range of offerings at justicebrothers.com. If you're fond of awesome motor racing collectibles, including Pfaff Motorsports McLaren gear and goodies, pay a visit to torontomotorsports.com. And finally, we have a new online merchandise home for the podcast, thepruittstore.com. For all the show stickers, models, racing memorabilia I'm trying to sell and put towards our fund to buy a house is now live and rocking. thepruittstore.com. So we have decent changes going on within the paddock, personnel-wise, definitely driver-wise. We've got some questions here too. Let's see, what can we pick up on from our last episode? What's happened since then? Spoke good long while with Dale Coyne and his shift of strategy. We'd done a story, I don't know, a month, two ago, however long. Dale started talking to me earlier in the year on the concept of these charters, which have finally been released from Penske Entertainment, and how he thought he could find some investors in the charters themselves, received 2 of them for his 2-car team. And for what he'd been talking about for most of the year, it was not selling a stake in Dale Coyne Racing, but if someone wanted to buy into one of the charters or both, invest in them now, cool. They would be a co-owner of that entry from a charter standpoint. And that's apparently shifted here in the last however long. That was the conversation Dale and I had, talking about, actually looking to find an investor for Dale Coyne Racing itself. Sell a percentage of the business to whomever might hopefully say, yes, want to do that, let's be partners. So published that story since the last episode. The name that I hear the most and have heard the most, included that in the story as well, is Todd Alt, who was primary sponsor for one or more entries at Ed Carpenter Racing in recent years through his BitNile company and some other companies of his. This past season, is it Guy Care? I'm forgetting the name of it. I'm sorry. It was on the side pods of Christian Rasmussen's car. That, I believe, is a business that Todd started as well, but would be quite interesting to see if Mr. Alt and Mr. Coyne are able to come to some form of agreement. Todd being very interested in buying a team, buying into a team. I think we were at Iowa when he told me on the grid, a little bit of a flyby, that he was going to buy a team. And so we'll see where that lands. Looking at what else we have come up with here, spoken about, our guy Romain Grosjean. Known this for a while, that he's been kind of floating in limbo, waiting to hear from Juncos Hollinger Racing if they're going to pick up his option for 2025. and spent some time with Romain on the phone while he's in, I forget exactly which Midwest state, but doing a long, almost week-long flight training for a new jet that he wants to own and use to get himself around in. But confirmed for sure that, yep, still waiting. Haven't heard any yes from Junko Solinger Racing to continue in that number 77 Chevy. Also told me, which I didn't include in the article because I left it just to IndyCar, that he assumes everything's going forward with Lamborghini for next year in IMSA in the GTP class, knowing that Lamborghini is not expected to continue in the World Endurance Championship in hypercar with that same model. What that might do for Romain in terms of Le Mans or any other races outside of IMSA, not totally sure. For what Lamborghini is committed to with IMSA and their WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, it's the endurance races only. So 5 out of the 9 or 10 races, they'll be there. So Romain believes all of that is still good. So at the moment, if you are a fan of the Swiss-born Frenchman, right now, you'll be going to Daytona, Sebring, Watkins Glen, Indianapolis, and Road Atlanta to see him compete in 2025. If and when we get some news about IndyCar for him, then hopefully for his sake, he'll get to do more. Also mentioned in that conversation, while he's trying to help Junko Solinger with finding some sponsors through some of his connections, team has been, unfortunately, dreadful in that regard here for the last couple of years. Also acknowledged he's been talking to Dale Coyne about possibly returning there. So decent amount of watch this space when it comes to good old GRO. Spent some time on the phone with Angelina Ertzu. She's the co-team principal of the Prema Racing program. Good to catch up with Angelina. She is awesome. Telling us that, yep, everything's progressing. Got about 40 people hired so far in their Indianapolis area team and expect to get that up to about 50 by the time we get to the Indianapolis 500. Asked her, when do you think you're going to get out, right? All those new cars you bought, when are you going to shake them down, start testing? And assumed it would be before the end of the year. She said there is no specific date for that, but don't be surprised if it's more of a early 2025 thing. So did strike me as a bit interesting on that one. IndyCar is indeed pretty restrictive about test days and whatnot, but for a brand new team coming into the series, despite having one veteran driver in Callum Ilott and some veteran crew, decent amount of them coming from other teams, this is not a true startup team, fresh out of Europe, never done this before, everything being a huge learning curve. But at the same time, knowing that we got Chip Ganassi Racing going to Texas this week and testing, we've got Thermal Club next week, which we'll talk about in a moment, with at least 5 teams there doing testing and so on and so forth. There's a pretty decent effort by the existing IndyCar teams to get out and go testing, use whatever days they can, evaluation days, Indy NXT driver days, to apply some learning to some of the ideas that they have on the chassis R&D side for next season, right? Get out. We got some ideas. We've been working on this in the background late into the last season, and over the last 2 months now, basically, we've been into the off season. Let's get out and try some of these things, get a feel for if we're in the right direction or not. And if there's good stuff, then we're going to keep pushing and developing that more. And we'll try those things again at tests here, end of the year, early next. Just sharing all that because for our friends at Prema, the idea of not getting out and doing anything more than a shakedown until early next year, knowing that the season starts right at the beginning of March, just feels like not a ton of time to really get up to speed the way that they would want. Also had pretty significant change take place here. Admittedly, I don't know if it was Friday or Monday or what, but old friend Michael Cannon, one of my race engineering mentors and oldest friends, left AJ Foyt Racing. And so in his role there as technical director, really did help to transform that team in the 2 years he was with them, decided to leave. And so speaking with Larry Foyt, mentioned that definitely wasn't something that he was wanting, but nonetheless, so they're not sure if they're going to backfill Cannon's position, obviously with the strong technical alliance they have with Team Penske, which Cannon was central figure in helping to orchestrate and develop. They do have that backbone to work with, so that's pretty impressive already for what they have resource-wise. Cannon really the person on top of it all, making everything work super well above race engineers, James Schnabel and Michael Armbruster. Larry Foyt also told me that they're swapping engineers for next year, so James is moving from Ferrucci's car, where they finished 9th in the championship, over to Davey Malukas' car. Armbruster going over to Santino. They actually worked together when Santino did, I think, those 5 races or so with Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing in 2021. So interesting change there on the engineering front. And then also had known this for a while, but hadn't published it. But Larry confirming that crew chief Didier Francesia, who really the big glue guy under the tent there, who was the leader crew chief on that number 14 Chevy driven by Santino, chose to not move with the team from Texas, knowing that they're moving that 14 car up to Speedway, Indiana, right next to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and running the entire team, both cars, out of that shop. Didier chose to not travel with the team and resume that in the Indy area with them. Indeed has taken a shop-based role with Arrow McLaren. So doing the move, just not with the same team. So, and they have hired Steve McKenzie from Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, who will be crew chief. So anyways, a lot of stuff moving, and we're still not done. We got more stuff coming up here next week. So why don't we dive into your questions, and I'll get through as many as I can, and hopefully get the show done here in a reasonable amount of time. We open with Joy Sanford Williams, that's really sweet, saying, it was great to see you weekend before last, Daytona HSR live stream. Y'all did great. Thank you, Joy. That was a lot of fun. Blasted in there, did most of the live stuff on Saturday in the paddock and pre-grid driver interviews, looking at some cars, had a lot of fun there. And then spent Sunday up in the booth, calling the live stream with my friend Joe Bradley. So thank you, Joy. IndyCar Ken Anderson, MP, says the list grows for testing at Thermal on the 19th. It says, hearing that Logan Sargent was going there to test, says that seemed forced since the info got leaked. Now maybe 2 or 3 more drivers are joining him. Says, considering Thermal is mega private, my spidey sense is tingling. Is more going on than we know? I love you, Ken. Never change. I love the fact that even for something as boring and routine as testing, you are always able to find the angle or the potential drama, the undercurrent of something, even if there's nothing there. The fact that Sargent was testing for Meyershank Racing was indeed released before they intended to say anything about it. Not that that matters. The test plan was already in place, so there was going to be no jeopardy there of the info coming out without their control. But no, this started off as a Meyershank Racing test. They own the test. They own it, meaning they're the ones who reached out to Thermal, got the day approved. IndyCar approved the day as well. And they are indeed the ones renting the track. As normally happens, it's not cheap to go and do this. Ohio-based team sending their trucks all the way out to California. Same thing for the other teams sending their trucks out. It's a long and expensive trip, both travel and personnel-wise. And then you have the fact that the track, whatever it is you might be going to, charges a heck of a bunch of money to rent it for the day. So what you have with a situation like this, Ken, is Team X is going to go out and test at, name wherever it is. It's a big bill from the track already before all the travel costs. So you tend to alert the rest of the teams, hey, we're going out to this place. If you have an interest in joining us, you're welcome to. And then all of a sudden, whatever that cost for the day is gets divided by many. And so I think 5 teams are headed out to Thermal now. We have Shank. We have Arrow McLaren with Enzo Fittipaldi. We have Team Penske with Felipe Nasr. Ed Carpenter Racing is heading out. They will have Hunter McElroy. Dale Coyne told me he expects to send a car out. Didn't say with who, and still, again, not totally sure if that's going to happen. And I might be forgetting another team, but 4 to 5 teams. So that's the way things normally work for private tests like this. Bring in as many other teams as you can to just divide that bill by 3, 4, 5, however many it might be, ends up becoming much more economical for everybody. On the Logan Sargent front, that thing has confused some folks, and I understand why. Team has 2 drivers, right? Our guy Felix Frozenquist, good old Fro, he will indeed be with the team again next year. They've added Marcus Armstrong from Chip Ganassi Racing. Those are their full-time drivers. No full-time opportunities or part-time opportunities available. So why would you go test with someone that isn't your driver? Well, IndyCar has those 2 mechanisms available that I mentioned. Indy NXT driver test. That's what Ganassi is using to go do a day at Texas using Jacob Abel. They want to learn oval stuff. The kid's really good. Using that day made available through the rules to place a NXT driver in the car. Then you have the evaluation days. Those are a little more nebulous. Can't be a current driver. Can't be someone who's in the series. And so that's why they look outside and bring in Logan Sargent, Enzo Fittipaldi, Felipe Nasr. I remember the other team. I was forgetting that would be Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, running there with Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong? Yes, the amazing jazz trumpeter who's been dead. Yeah. How about Louis Foster? I'm going to leave that in. They're going to be testing with Louis Foster. I don't remember what day they're using, what type of day, but regardless, he'll be there. But you have these scenarios, Ken, where Enzo's not driving for Arrow McLaren. They don't have any vacancies, and Felipe is not driving for Team Penske. Same situation. Why is Logan testing with Marshank Racing when they have no vacancies? Couple things. It's the off season, so hey, there's not a crazy amount of news and whatnot going on. So what's a really good way for a media savvy team like Marshank Racing to get a big off-season hit? Very popular driver by the name of Logan Sargent doing his first ever IndyCar test in their car. Also have the fact that Logan, obviously no longer in Formula One, looking for options for himself. There are some vacancies in IndyCar. Could a really strong test be something that piques the interest of a Juncos Hollinger Racing or a Dale Coyne Racing? It's entirely possible. Could Meyer Shank Racing, looking to the future, if they were to expand, or if there was driver change that might be considered in the future, heck, even if Felix or Marcus come down with the flu and can't race next weekend, wherever it might be, not a bad thing to have spent a day with Logan, get a feel for him. I'm sure he's going to be really quick, and I'm sure the team is going to love him to know that, okay, we got this arrow in our quiver. We can certainly consider him. All things in those range. Good media hit, very good driver, interested in IndyCar, get him some mileage, exposes him to the other teams that are there, to Honda as well, Meyershank Racing's supplier. Could he be part of something else in the Meyershank Racing future? Who knows? Keeping in mind they also have an IMSA team, so there's nothing negative about this. It just doesn't fit the, oh, you're going to go test a new person because there's an immediate opportunity, right? Not the case, but that's pretty much always the case with these evaluation tests. Tyler Wong says, do you see any issue of teams complaining about the charter system for races outside the Indianapolis 500 if they lose money? I don't, Tyler, because the charter system in IndyCar is nothing like NASCAR's charter, where teams that have those charters in NASCAR are in a true business relationship with the series. They receive nice money carved out of the TV deal, for example, the big media rights deal that NASCAR has with a variety of broadcasters. Its charter teams get nice chunks of money from that to help them with their bottom line. IndyCar's had the leader circle prize money sharing thing for dang near 20 years now, but there's nothing new in the charter that has anything that connects teams to Penske Entertainment to receive new money, big money, you name it. So I can't see why there'd be any complaints about the charters that all the full-time team owners signed in IndyCar, because never ever has there been and you're going to get money from us as a result of signing this being included in any aspect of it. So if there's anybody complaining about the charter who just signed it, I can't come up with a reason why they would, Tyler, because they've never had expectations for it to be a money maker in season, money coming in through it from TV deal or whatever other deal. It's never been a part of it. So if you don't expect it and have never been told to expect it, I would think that's not something you could be complaining about or upset about. Tom Goolsby, this might be one of the most interesting out of left field questions we have gotten on the show in a while, and I appreciate you for sending it in. This is Marshall. What do you think Dallara thinks of the charters as currently written in the limit of 27 or 25 cars at races except Indy? It's 27, by the way. We expect it to become 25 here when new cars arrive, supposedly in 2027. So it seems like it reduces market for the current car and raises cost per car for new cars, since development costs would be spread across expected new market. Again, really interesting angle here, Tom. I had not thought of. I can't imagine Dallara's got much of an opinion on this, because what was it, 5 years ago? Don't hold me to that, but we had 22 full-time, 23, 24. This recent high of 27, which came about, I think it was 25 full-time cars in 2022. 23, it rose to 27. Last year, it held at 27. And going into next season, we are baked in at 27. It's a good recent thing, for sure. But would also say for many, many, many years, over the current car's lifespan, it's fluctuated in that 22 to 24 range. So I don't foresee Dallara being sideways about anything. If we do indeed cut down to 25, because it's just in a very familiar number, meaning, hey, kind of spare sales, parts and pieces, lifing that gets sold, and new componentry and whatnot. I don't foresee this being something that really has any backward steps for Dallara financially. Obviously, in moving to a new car, and assuming we are going to be capped at 25 cars, would say they're still going to be selling a whole lot of cars. They sold something like 60 new chassis when the DW12 was initiated. And I mean, they're up over 100 right now, but don't think this is going to have any kind of critical effect for them. Could be wrong, right? Always open to learning. And if I am wrong, my friends at Dallara usually tell me, but at least for my pea brain, I can't find the negative angle here. Let's pick up with I_run_from_problems. It's Marshall. Question regarding the charters that got brought up on the previous episode. One of the big gripes, and one that I agree with, is the absence of a path in for teams like Dreyer Reinbold, Abel, HMD. But what could that path have been? With certain tracks maxed out at 27, I feel it would be unfair to force existing teams to give up entries for those who either aren't in the series yet or aren't there full time. So what would a solution be? Yeah, the interesting thing is there was no, quote, maximum of 27 in place beforehand. There was going to be a scenario where merit-based participation. We used to have that, not a lot, and not for very long in the IndyCar series days, in its most popular general range. Early 90s comes to mind. Formula One had pre-qualifying for a number of years when it was, again, really, really crazy popular. Senna years, Prost years, and such, where there are a lot of teams that wanted to be there, which is a great thing. And so instead of implementing a system that said, no, forget you, new team, smaller team, who might want to grow and become a big powerhouse one day, which is usually the case with most teams, right? Rarely does a Prema show up and then just instantly dominate. Usually you're towards the back and you work your way forward over the coming years. We're not even going to allow that now. So to me, there's this artifice that has been installed here that said, okay, basically we are forming a club, and if you aren't in it right now, you can't be in it, except for this new team that's never been here, invested nothing in Indy NXT, USF championships, anything, but because they have wealth and can buy a lot of cars, and Chevy's agreed to supply them engines, well, you get favor despite never turning a single wheel here in the U.S. in open wheel racing and contributing to our form of racing. That's the part that sticks in my craw a little bit. And this isn't aimed specifically at Prema. It could be any team coming from outside of our hemisphere and being granted baked in allowance to contribute, while a Able Motorsports, HMD or otherwise, that's been here for a good long while, contributes massively, is not allowed to play. So what path could have been? Well, merit-based participation. I really wish that is something that IndyCar would have allowed. Hey, Able, you're going to do a full season or partial season. Hey, HMD. Hey, run on down the list. If you want to participate, cool. Come here and try and make the show. Like I said, it didn't happen a ton, and it didn't happen for super long, but it is not a unfamiliar thing in IndyCar history outside the Indy 500. Definitely a part of Formula One back in the day. Granted, if you're a newer F1 fan, you probably have no idea or weren't aware or have had to read about pre-qualifying just from a historical context. But these are things to me that in a true a true racer spirited mindset, I want to know that those I'm competing against are here because they belong. Do they belong because they've been around? So we said, well, you're now in our big club and no one can challenge you. I don't know if that's what comes to mind for me when I think of racing. I think of the best taking part and those who aren't the best not taking part. So yeah, it's something as simple as that. Okay. We're not going to put a hard cap on how many cars can compete. And we're also not going to bake in somebody that's never even been here before. I realize that this dynamic still exists where if Ray Letterman and Lanigan Racing wants to enter a fourth car at some place and we have 28 entries, well, there will be bumping that goes on. There will be one car that goes home. Who knows who that might be? And this could very well happen this coming season. Just like the idea of, for those who are on that ladder, especially in a Penske Entertainment-owned series like Indy NXT, who've been doing big things to make that series grow and prosper, we know for sure Abel, owning 2 DW12s, was really and seriously looking at doing more than just the Indy 500. That has unfortunately waned, and HMD has said, we're just out altogether. We're not even going to try. And they have the ability to be here. So it's the spirit of that. So again, could they buy a car, hopefully get an engine lease, and go and try and bust their way into that 27 car field? Yeah, for sure. Just think that there's something slightly off when the ones who've been here are the ones who are instantly at risk compared to those who've never been here. So, yeah. Why don't we go to Vincent 1701? Says, Roger Penske acts like buying the Indy 500 was his dream. Getting IndyCar League is a burden. IndyCar League. I've never seen those two words put together. Vincent, I love that. Yeah. You then say thoughts. I didn't know that Penske is acting like owning the IndyCar League. I think I'm just going to go with that for now on, Vincent, to just mash totally different eras together. Or maybe we'll just start calling it the IRL again. So great stuff there. Yeah, owning the Indy 500 definitely comes across as a dream. He loves it. He's a brick and mortar guy, owning properties. He understands that side of business. We've spoken about this ad nauseum on the show since they bought everything. Roger, by actions, treats the IndyCar League more like a straight-up business, and one that he's not happy with because it is a money loser each season. And that also fits his very business-minded self. So what you are stating here is something that I would say is something spoken about many times, written about many times, by no means something that would have just popped up as a thing. So, but thank you for the gift of IndyCar League. I'm going to use that whenever I can. Let's see. Corey Johnson says, thoughts to you and Mrs. Pruitt. 2 questions. With Andretti leaving Andretti Global, what, if any, effects does that have for the Weldon boys and their development / support? Or is that more from Gainbridge? I'll get to your second question here in just a moment. Definitely a Michael and Dan Towers initiative. Dan being the one to put the money behind them through his Gainbridge company, would say that there's no way dropping support of the Weldon boys, Sebastian Oliver, would, oh boy, yeah. You want to talk about getting ushered out of the building as well. I can't foresee that happening at any point in time. So yeah, it's one of those deals that once you opt into that, you know you're committing to more than just a year or two of lower junior formula type stuff. You are certainly getting heavily involved in helping Dan and Susie's sons to move well along in their careers. Could also just throw in the fact here, Corey, that we have Gainbridge supporting NASCAR entries and other places. So they're spending a lot of money to be involved in motor racing, and whatever the Weldon kids require is seriously the tiniest drop in a bucket compared to what spending to sponsor a IndyCar for the full season or anything in NASCAR would cost. So can't foresee anything changing there. You also say, second, at what point is it acceptable to decorate for Christmas? And that question I do not understand, Corey, because it implies that decorations came down after Christmas. Don't do that. Keep them up all year. Be that neighbor who takes delight each night, just as the sun is starting to set, who walks outside in a very demonstrative way and takes that extension cord and connects the lights you have strung around the house or apartment, whatever it might be, turns on those lights just so everyone can see. You are a 365 day a year Christmas flex kind of person. So, I mean, hello. Austin Taylor says, any word on where the Weldon brothers will race in 2025? I have an answer of no, because I haven't asked, but your question makes me realize I probably should. Lynn, formerly the Spurs fan. When teams cut back cars, like say Penske or Andretti, it seems like the overall team does better. Says, do you think Chip Ganassi Racing will improve with their recent change? I do not. That's because some of what they have lost in terms of driver talent in Linus Lundqvist and Marcus Armstrong made the team better. So could we say that running 5 cars this past season was too much and just a drag on the overall organization? I'd suggest no, since they won the championship again with our guy Alex Palou. What about the year before when they ran 4 cars full time? I would say no, knowing how they won the championship there too with our guy Alex Palou. Something to consider is Marcus Ericsson, former driver, now with Andretti, would say that's been the most significant talent loss in terms of contributing to the overall speed and benefit of the team. Team was certainly still very good in 2024. Scott Dixon, very effective. Not as effective, but still very effective. Kiffin Simpson is the third and final driver here going forward. He's a sophomore, right? He has 1 year of experience. Realize that Linus was a rookie last season. Realize that Armstrong was still relatively young in his IndyCar career, but those are higher level drivers, higher skilled, higher experienced than Kiffin. And so Kiffin's going to need more time and mileage to develop those skills upwards to a similar, equal, or possibly greater level than a Linus, Marcus, or even the previous Marcus Ericsson. So this does not make them a better team. It just makes them a smaller team. Fewer points of quality input from drivers and engineers, since we now have fewer race engineer/driver combos working together, trying out things, giving that information back to the pool that can benefit everybody. I don't foresee how this makes them better, at least not in 2025. When we get to 26, Kiffin coming into his junior year, maybe that will change. Why don't we go to a person whose name I don't see here, unfortunately. What is the problem with the night race at Texas? It is the best racing in the world. Well, are we talking Texas Motor Speedway? Are we talking Texas World Speedway? Are we talking Circuit of the Americas? I don't know exactly which Texas, but if I assume it's Texas Motor Speedway, yeah. Day race, night race, you name it, they were almost always awesome. The problem, as it has been described to me by the series, is the track was not interested in engaging them in a date to hold a race. And so that's the problem. It's kind of like asking someone out and them saying no. So you might think that that would be an amazing person to date, and maybe the history proves that'd be an amazing person to date. But if they reject you, no date. Steve Grinstead says, MP, to bring the elephant into the room. How will the presidential election affect IndyCar and future races? That's a fantastic question, Steve. I was even thinking about writing about this, not from a politics standpoint, but from a how many team owners, drivers seeking sponsors, etc. have told me everything is basically on hold until the election is over. So big anxiety. Which direction are we going or aren't we going? Whichever belief those sponsors had in terms of presidential candidates and belief of whether one would be better than the other in terms of prosperity, tax breaks, whatever it might be. Yeah, it's actually not a new thing by any means. But yeah, every 4 years there is a collective holding of breath in North American motor racing, at least, to see who's going to be elected. If there's belief that that elected person is going to do big things financially that help or possibly hurt. And so in 2 conversations I've had now since the election was a week ago, I've had 2 team owners tell me, like, okay, now we can start to get down to business with some negotiations, and, you know, effectively the pause button has been released. So would be hard for me to make any predictions about what the economy is going to look like once the new administration moves in. We're obviously many months away from the first IndyCar race being held, which would be, what, under 2 months from inauguration and whatnot. So really hard to predict what the economy is going to be like. But I can tell you that for the vast majority of the team owners in IndyCar, if not, I'm running down the list, I think just about every single one, their preferred party and preferred candidate and administration is heading to Washington. And so the belief, the positivity of mind is definitely there in the IndyCar world, because this was the outcome that they were all hoping for and believing will only add to the positivity expected to come from heading into Fox full-time on broadcast and so on and so forth. So, yeah, if we're talking about how it could affect things, I can at least tell you anecdotally and just mindset-wise, you have an ecstatic paddock full of owners right now. Vincent 1701, you're back. He says, which IRL livery was the best? There we go. It's no longer IndyCar League. We've gone full IRL. So, my brother Vincent, I'll keep this in and I'll share this with you. You send in many questions. They rarely get used because questions like this, it's a bit like starting a sentence and not completing it, where you go, I don't know exactly what to do here. Just sharing with you. You're always welcome to send stuff in. I'll just ask you to put a little more thought into them. Which IRL livery was the best? You then answer Scott Sharp's gets my vote. You realize that Scott Sharp drove for multiple teams, had multiple liveries over multiple years. No clue what you're talking about, brother, because you haven't told us, because Scott Sharp didn't drive for one team with one livery for his entire career. You also say, which driver would make a great driving coach? Oriol Servia. Hrishi Deshpan. How are you, Hrishi? It's been a little while. Says, best wishes to you and Mrs. Pruitt. Wondering if you have any good Bob Riley stories. The late Bob Riley. Oh, boy. That still just breaks my heart. Amazing race car designer. Says, it's been very interesting to read up on his life and career in the wake of his passing. One that stands out to me would have been 2008, I think. Yeah, I don't know if it was 2008, 2009, maybe, at Miller Motorsports Park in Utah, in Tooele, Utah. And I forget what it's called today. But once upon a time, it held a number of major professional races each year. American Le Mans Series would visit. Grand Am Rolex Series would visit. I think others visited as well. Was there, was talking to Bob's son Bill, good friend, and he said, hey, if you get a chance, come visit us in our motorhome. And it was a motorhome like one you would rent, not like the big $1 million buses that you see drivers or inter-team owners, but like truly something you'd rent just for the weekend if you're going to go fishing and wanted to just park next to the river. And so he said, yeah, we've got a cool design, really proud of. And said, like, that's amazing, would love to. And so went and did that, I think, like the next day, and sat with Bob. And these were, I believe, printouts compared to being on a computer screen. But he had designed a new LMP2 car. I know it was an IndyCar show, but you asked any good stories. And it was a brand new LMP2 car. And it had been a long time since Bob had designed a kind of cutting edge prototype. They had designed the tube frame, intentionally lower tech Riley chassis that ran in the Daytona prototype class in Grand Am, but the rules intentionally were made to be very simple, not high tech, inexpensive cars, just focus on the racing, not the tech. And it was just really cool to see Mr. Riley, who would have been 70 something at that point, mid 70s, I think. So happy and proud, Hrishi, of this design. And, you know, LMP1 was still raging monster, right? You had Audi and Peugeot and all that spending trillions competing at Le Mans, in the ALMS, in Europe and whatnot. But LMP2 was a sufficiently wide open class, a lot of different manufacturers involved there. The car was never built, unfortunately, but I can just tell you that being invited into their inner sanctum, knowing obviously my mechanical and racing engineering background, spoken with them, you know, countless times about the things in that area regarding Bob's designs and Bill's designs too. It's just really cool, Hrishi, to be invited into this inner sanctum to see this, call it secret designs, not something they'd told the public about, hadn't been published in any place, that it was in the works. Just, yeah, it was a really cool invitation to receive. And then sitting there with Bob and with Bill looking at it. And I think there were some exploded drawings of it as well. And just having Bob describe all the things about it that he thought were going to be unique and difference makers and things to really create a highly competitive car to take on the LMP2 market. We know that, 7-8 years later, they did in LMP2, working with Multimatic. It's the basis of the Mazda DPI, but just this legend of legends, right? Open wheel, Indy 500 winning chassis designer, won every race imaginable in the world with his cars and sports cars and such. It's just so cool. I'll always remember that. It was just the honor of being asked to come sit with Bob and have him show me something private, and it being really cool, and it looking like it could indeed go beat up the world if they were able to build it. Treasured moments there. Thanks, y'all. Everything you've sent in, to our friend Jerry Siddeth for putting the questions together, to our friends at TorontoMotorsports.com. They do indeed make really fun stuff, memorabilia-wise. A lot of crazy stuff. I would recommend paying them a visit and buying some good stuff from them. Also, our pals at Pfaff Technologies. And then the Justice Brothers, makers of amazing automotive, agricultural, you name it, application, lubricants, and specialty brews. So big thanks to all of our partners who make this show possible, and to y'all. Headed off here for what should be my final flight of the year, leaving out Thursday for Daytona. There's a 3-day new torque sensor test and otherwise going on at Daytona. About 30 cars there across GTP, LMP2, and the GT Daytona classes. And then, fly out Sunday, head to good old Palm Springs, and we'll be there Monday morning to hit thermal and get ready to do about 2/3 of a day of test coverage on Tuesday, and then fly home and try and enjoy the final hours of our 19th wedding anniversary. So, y'all, appreciate you. Thank you, and I'll speak to y'all here soon. Very, very soon.